The data from Earth arrived 3 days later, and Princess Zarathik immediately understood why humans were unlike any species the galaxy had ever encountered. The probe footage showed creatures that defied every principle of evolutionary logic, massive reptilian predators with bone-crushing jaws that could generate pressures exceeding 20,000 pounds per square inch. Striped hunters that moved with perfect stealth and could leap 30 feet in a single bound. Pack predators whose endurance allowed them to chase prey for dozens of miles without rest. Ocean dwellers larger than Veltar battleships, with intelligence that approached sapient levels. These creatures should be the dominant species, Dexic observed, studying the footage with obvious unease. Why did they allow humans to develop civilization? The answer was even more disturbing than the question. Humans hadn't been allowed to develop anything. They had carved out their civilization by defeating these creatures through sheer determination and superior tactics. The probe data showed human settlements existing in close proximity to apex predators, not through avoidance but through active dominance. Zarathik was reviewing footage of human settlements in Earth's wilderness areas when an emergency signal interrupted her analysis. The alert came from her ship's security sensors. Something was approaching the human lunar facility at tremendous speed. Report, she commanded. Unknown. Craft detected, her navigation officer reported. Configuration doesn't match any human vessel in our databases. It appears to be on a collision course with the lunar facility. Zarathik studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. The approaching vessel was massive, irregularly shaped, and showed signs of significant damage. Its trajectory suggested it was completely out of control. Life signs? She asked. Unclear, Your Highness. The craft's hull is interfering with our biological sensors. However, I'm detecting unusual electromagnetic signatures that don't correspond to any known technology. Within minutes, the mysterious vessel crashed into the lunar surface less than a mile from the human research facility. The impact was violent enough to register on seismic sensors throughout the local space region. Worse yet, the crash had breached the facility's outer perimeter defenses. Zarathik watched through her observation equipment as the human team quickly assessed the situation. Emergency alarms were blaring throughout their facility, and atmospheric breach indicators showed multiple hull compromises. That craft wasn't human, Dr. Peterson announced after reviewing their sensor data. The metal composition and technological signatures are completely unknown. Marcus was already suiting up for external investigation. We need to check for survivors and assess whether the crash caused any contamination hazards. Marcus, we don't know what we're dealing with, Sarah warned. That could be an alien craft, possibly hostile. All the more reason to investigate quickly. If someone needs help, we can't just ignore them. Zarathik found herself leaning forward in anticipation. The crashed vessel was indeed alien, though not from any species she recognized. More importantly, her sensors were detecting life signs within the wreckage, something large, powerful, and definitely not human. Marcus approached the crash site with 2 companions, moving carefully across the lunar surface toward the twisted remains of the alien vessel. The craft had torn a gash nearly 50 feet long in the lunar rock, and strange energies flickered around its damaged hull. There, Marcus pointed toward an opening in the wreckage. Something's moving inside. Zarathik's sensors confirmed his observation. The life form inside the craft was approximately 12 feet tall, massively muscled and equipped with natural weapons that included razor-sharp claws and powerful mandibles. Its physiology suggested it was an apex predator from a high-gravity world with dangerous environmental conditions. Be careful, Sarah's voice crackled through Marcus's communication system. Whatever that thing is, it's big. The creature emerged from the wreckage with fluid grace that belied its enormous size. Zarathik immediately recognized it as a Korthik hunter, one of the most feared predatory species in known space. The Korthak were legendary for their combat abilities. They could tear through advanced body armor with their bare claws and had reflexes fast enough to dodge energy weapons fire. This particular specimen was clearly injured from the crash, but it remained incredibly dangerous. Green blood dripped from multiple wounds, and its four arms moved with the careful precision of a creature assessing potential threats, the Korthak's large eyes fixed immediately on the three humans approaching the crash site. Its mandibles clicked together in a sound that Zarathik recognized as a threat display. The creature was preparing to attack. "Back away slowly," Marcus instructed his companions. "Don't make any sudden movements." But it was too late. The Korthak had identified the humans as potential prey, and its predatory instincts were overriding any rational consideration of the situation. With a roar that could be heard through the lunar environment's thin atmosphere, the creature launched itself toward Marcus. Zarathik watched in fascination as the most feared predator in known space charged toward a human, who weighed perhaps 1/10 of its mass. This would finally demonstrate human limitations in the face of genuine physical superiority. The Korthak covered the distance between itself and Marcus in two massive bounds, each leap carrying it more than 20 feet across the lunar surface. Its claws extended to their full 8-inch length, and its mandibles opened wide enough to tear off a human head with a single bite. Marcus didn't run. Instead, he stepped forward to meet the creature's charge, his movements calm and deliberate. As the Korthak reached him, Marcus shifted his weight slightly and grabbed the creature's leading arm with both hands. What happened next defied everything Zarathik thought she knew about physics, biology, and the nature of predatory combat. Marcus used the Korthak's own momentum against it, redirecting the massive creature's charge and sending it tumbling across the lunar surface. The move required perfect timing, incredible strength, and an understanding of leverage that suggested extensive combat experience. The Korthak rolled to its feet with impressive agility, clearly surprised by this unexpected resistance. It studied Marcus with new wariness, recognizing that this small creature was more dangerous than it appeared. "Marcus, get out of there!" Sarah's voice was filled with panic as she watched from the facility's observation deck, but Marcus was already moving toward the creature again. The Korthak lashed out with its claws, attempting to disembowel the human. With a sweeping attack that could have cut through steel, plating. Marcus ducked under the attack and drove his fist into the creature's solar plexus with a precision that indicated detailed knowledge of Korthak anatomy. The blow landed with enough force to stagger a creature that weighed nearly 2,000 pounds. The Korthak roared in pain and rage, swinging all four of its massive arms in a coordinated attack pattern that should have overwhelmed any single opponent. Marcus seemed to flow between the striking limbs like water, his movements economical and perfectly timed. Zarathik was recording everything, but she was having difficulty believing what her own sensors were showing her. A human weighing 160 pounds was fighting hand-to-hand combat with a Korthak hunter, and not just surviving, but actually winning. "Impossible," she whispered. Marcus caught one of the creature's arms and used it as leverage to swing himself up onto the Korthak's back. Before the creature could react, Marcus had wrapped his arm around its thick neck and applied pressure to specific nerve points. The Korthak's struggles became increasingly frantic as Marcus maintained his hold. Creatures that could tear through battle armor were being subdued by precise application of pressure to vulnerable points. Within 30 seconds, the massive predator collapsed to the lunar surface. Unconscious but still breathing, Marcus released his hold and stepped back, breathing heavily but otherwise unharmed. His companions rushed to his side, their voices filled with amazement and concern. "Marcus, what the hell was that?" Dr. Peterson demanded. "Korthak hunter," Marcus replied calmly, as if he encountered galactic apex predators on a regular basis. They're ambush predators with incredible strength but limited endurance. If you can avoid their initial attack and wear them down, they become vulnerable to nerve pressure techniques. Zarathik stared at her sensor readings in complete shock. Marcus had not only recognized an alien species he should never have encountered, but he had demonstrated detailed knowledge of its anatomy and combat capabilities. More importantly, he had defeated it using techniques that suggested extensive training in interspecies combat. How could he possibly know about Korthic anatomy? Dexic asked in amazement. Run a complete analysis of human information networks, Zarathic ordered. Search for any data about alien species, combat techniques, or interplanetary warfare. The results were staggering. Human information systems contained detailed files on hundreds of alien species, including accurate anatomical data, behavioral patterns, and combat assessments. They had been preparing for contact with galactic civilization for decades, studying every species they could identify through long-range observations, but the truly disturbing discovery was that humans hadn't just been studying aliens academically. Their military forces had been developing. Over the following days, Princess Zarathic found herself completely absorbed in studying the human facility. What had begun as a routine assessment of a weak species had transformed into something far more complex and troubling. Every observation contradicted her initial assumptions about human limitations. Dr. Marcus Chun became her primary subject of interest, though she expanded her surveillance to include the entire research team. The more she watched, the more questions arose about human capabilities. The humans worked in shifts, but Marcus often stayed late to continue his research. During these extended periods, Zarathic observed behaviors that defied conventional understanding of biological limitations. Marcus could focus on complex calculations for hours without the mental fatigue that affected most species. His accuracy remained constant even after 14 hours of continuous work. Analyze their neural activity patterns, she instructed her science team back on the ship. The results were extraordinary. Human brains operated on principles that the Veltar had never encountered. Instead of the efficient, linear processing that characterized most intelligent species, human minds functioned through massive parallel networks that could simultaneously handle multiple complex problems. Even more remarkable was their ability to make intuitive leaps that bypassed traditional logical processes entirely. They call it creativity, Commander Dexic reported after reviewing human communication intercepts. Humans regularly generate entirely new concepts without following established logical frameworks. Zarathic had trouble accepting this information. In Veltar society, as in most advanced civilizations, knowledge progressed through careful, methodical advancement of existing principles. The idea that a species could simply invent entirely new concepts was almost incomprehensible. Her skepticism was challenged when she witnessed Marcus working on what appeared to be an impossible mathematical problem. The human facility's computer systems had encountered a calculation error in their dark matter research, a complex equation involving quantum field interactions that their primitive computers couldn't solve, rather than wait for assistance from Earth. Marcus spent 3 days working through the mathematics manually. Zarathic watched in fascination as he covered dozens of surfaces with symbols and formulas, constantly erasing and rewriting his work. The problem would have challenged the Veltar Empire's most sophisticated computers. Yet this single human was attempting to solve it using only his biological brain. On the 3rd day, Marcus suddenly stopped writing and stared at his equations for several minutes. Then he began crossing out entire sections and replacing them with completely different approaches. His colleagues gathered around as he explained his breakthrough. He had identified a fundamental error in the original mathematical framework and developed an entirely new methodology. He just reinvented quantum field mathematics, Dexic whispered in amazement. Our own scientists needed centuries to develop those principles. But Zarathic was more disturbed by how Marcus had achieved his breakthrough. Rather than following logical progressions, he had made multiple intuitive leaps that somehow led to correct conclusions. It was as if human minds operated according to rules that defied conventional understanding. Her growing unease increased when she began studying human physical capabilities more systematically. Marcus's feat of strength had not been an isolated incident. Every human at the facility demonstrated physical abilities that exceeded their apparent biological limitations. Dr. Sarah Peterson, despite being smaller than Marcus, regularly lifted equipment that should have required mechanical assistance. Dr. Kim, the engineer, worked for hours in uncomfortable positions that would have caused muscle failure in most species. Even more disturbing, the humans seem to adapt their capabilities based on necessity. They call it rising to the occasion, Vexic explained after monitoring more human communications. Their physical and mental performance increases dramatically when circumstances require it. Zarathic had never encountered such adaptive biology. Veltar capabilities remained constant regardless of circumstances, a mark of their superiority and reliability. The idea that a species could spontaneously exceed its normal limitations suggested either massive untapped potential or unknown biological mechanisms. Her observations took a darker turn when she discovered records of human conflict behavior. The research team occasionally discussed historical events, providing Zarathic with glimpses into humanity's military past. What she learned challenged her understanding of warfare itself. Humans, despite their apparent physical weaknesses, had developed combat tactics that relied on unpredictability, adaptation, and psychological warfare. They didn't simply fight, they created entirely new forms of conflict that confused and demoralized opponents. Worse yet, they seemed to excel in chaotic situations where traditional military doctrines failed. They actively seek conflict scenarios that other species try to avoid, she noted in her expanding report. Humans appear to thrive in conditions that would paralyze more logical species. The most disturbing discovery came when she analyzed human exploration patterns. Unlike the Veltar Empire, which expanded through careful planning and overwhelming force, humans spread throughout their local space by taking enormous risks. They regularly sent small groups into unknown dangers with minimal resources and unclear objectives. They call them pioneers, Vexic reported. Humans who deliberately seek out dangerous, unexplored territories. Such behavior was completely alien to Veltar thinking. Why would any rational species risk valuable lives on uncertain ventures? Yet human expansion continued precisely because individuals were willing to face unknown dangers for no clear reward. On the 12th day of observation, Zarathic witnessed something that fundamentally changed her assessment of humanity's threat level. A supply ship from Earth was approaching the lunar facility when its navigation systems failed due to solar interference. The ship, carrying critical supplies and 3 additional researchers, was drifting toward a collision course with the facility. Their primitive communication systems couldn't penetrate the solar storm, so no one at the facility knew about the approaching danger, except Marcus. Zarathic watched as the human suddenly stopped his work and moved to the communication station. He had no reason to be monitoring supply ship schedules. That was Dr. Peterson's responsibility. Yet something had prompted him to check the incoming traffic data. "Sarah," he called urgently, "we've got a problem." The human team quickly identified the situation. The supply ship would impact the facility in less than 2 hours, and their communication systems were too weak to reach the ship's crew through the solar interference. "We need to go out there and manually guide them to the docking port," Marcus said. His companions stared at him in disbelief. "Marcus, that's insane," Sarah replied. "You'd have to leave the facility during a solar storm, cross half a mile of open space, and somehow communicate with a ship that's traveling too fast to stop. Someone has to do it." Zarathic leaned forward in her observation pod, completely focused now. This was exactly the kind of situation that revealed a species' true nature. Logical beings would calculate the risks, determine the mission was impossible, and evacuate the facility. The humans would finally demonstrate their sensible limitations. Instead, Marcus was already suiting up for external operations. "I'm going with you," Sarah announced. "No," Marcus replied firmly. "You're needed here to coordinate the docking sequence once I establish contact. If this doesn't work, someone has to be alive to warn Earth about what happened." Zarathic watched in growing alarm as Marcus prepared for what appeared to be a suicide mission. The solar storm was intense enough to disrupt their ship's advanced shielding. A human in a primitive environmental suit should be killed within minutes of exposure. Marcus launched himself from the facility's external airlock using a small maneuvering unit. The solar storm immediately began interfering with his suit's systems, but he continued toward the approaching supply ship. Zarathik tracked his progress through her sensors, noting the increasing radiation levels that should have been lethal. His life signs remain stable, Vexik reported in amazement. His suit's radiation shielding is completely inadequate, yet he shows no signs of cellular damage. Somehow, Marcus covered the distance to the supply ship and managed to attach himself to its hull. Using crude chemical flares, he began signaling the crew inside. The ship's course gradually changed as the crew responded to his directions, but the effort was clearly taking its toll. By the time Marcus guided the ship to the facility's docking port, his suit's power systems were failing and his life support was critically low. He collapsed as soon as he re-entered the facility's atmosphere. "Get him to the medical bay," Sarah ordered. But Marcus was already struggling to his feet. "I'm fine," he insisted, though Zarathik's sensors indicated otherwise. His body had absorbed enough radiation to kill most species, yet he was walking and talking normally. "Did the supply ship dock safely?" "Yes, thanks to you." "Marcus, what you just did was impossible. Had to be done." That simple statement haunted Zarathik for hours afterward. Marcus hadn't calculated odds or weighed risks. He had simply identified a necessity and acted accordingly. Even more disturbing was, Princess Zarathik stood on the observation deck of the massive starship Celestial Dominion, her forearms crossed in a gesture that conveyed both boredom and superiority. The ship's crystalline walls offered a perfect view of the small blue planet below. A world the humans called Earth. Her purple skin shimmered with the natural bioluminescence that marked her royal bloodline, and her large golden eyes held the calculating intelligence that had made the Veltar Empire the dominant force in this galaxy. "Sector, so these are the creatures the Galactic Council wants us to consider for membership," she said to her aide, Commander Vexik, who stood nearby holding a data tablet with trembling hands. The commander was nervous, as most beings were in her presence. Zarathik was not just royalty, she was the daughter of Emperor Velthanos, whose military might had conquered 47 star systems. "Yes, Your Highness," Vexik replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "The humans have submitted their application for consideration as a Level 2 species. They claim to have achieved faster-than-light travel and established colonies on several worlds." Zarathik let out a sound that could charitably be called laughter, though it resembled more the hissing of steam from a broken pipe. "Look at them, Commander. They are so small, so fragile. Our intelligence reports say they live on a world with such weak gravity that their bones are hollow like bird creatures. They have no natural armor, no claws, no venomous glands. They cannot even see in multiple light spectrums like proper sentient beings." She gestured toward the planet with one of her lower arms while her upper arms remained crossed. "The council members must be getting soft in their old age to even consider such pathetic life forms. These humans will be nothing more than servants and laborers if they are lucky. More likely, they will be absorbed into stronger species when their weak governments inevitably collapse." Vexik made notes on his tablet, recording every word his princess spoke. These observations would become part of the official Veltar assessment that would be presented to the Galactic Council. The fate of an entire species often hung on such reports. "Shall we proceed directly to the council chambers on Nexus Prime?" Vexik asked, already preparing the navigation coordinates. "No," Zarathik said, surprising her aide. "I want to see these humans for myself first. Set course for their third moon. Our intelligence says they have established a research station there. I wish to observe them in their natural environment before I write my final report." 3 days later, the Celestial Dominion entered orbit around Luna, humanity's moon. The Veltar ship was massive enough to block out the sun from the perspective of anyone on the lunar surface, but it remained cloaked from human sensors. Zarathik had changed into her field uniform, a suit of biometal armor that enhanced her already impressive 8-foot frame and protected her from environmental hazards. The human lunar facility was smaller than she had expected. According to the ship's sensors, only 37 humans worked at the research station. They were studying something called dark matter manipulation and quantum field generators, technologies that the Veltar Empire had mastered centuries ago. "Deploy the observation pods," she commanded. "I want a closer look at these creatures." Within an hour, several small invisible craft had positioned themselves around the human facility. Zarathic settled into the command pod's observation chair, her golden eyes studying the humans, through advanced scanning equipment that could see through walls and record every detail. The humans were even more disappointing up close. They moved slowly in their bulky environmental suits, clearly struggling with equipment that any proper species would handle with ease. Their voices, transmitted through their primitive communication systems, were high-pitched and filled with unnecessary emotional inflections. They wasted time on small talk and jokes instead of focusing on their tasks with proper efficiency. "Look at how they struggle to lift that power core," Zarathic observed to her aide, who was recording everything from the second pod. "On our homeworld, a juvenile could carry 3 times that weight." She watched as 4 humans worked together to move a cylindrical device that weighed perhaps 300 pounds. They moved carefully, taking frequent breaks, constantly checking and rechecking their safety protocols. It was pathetic. "And observe their sleeping habits," she continued, switching her view to the facility's living quarters. "They waste 8 hours out of every 24 in unconsciousness. Proper warriors like the Veltar require only 2 hours of regeneration time." For 6 days, she watched and documented human weakness. They ate constantly, requiring fuel every few hours instead of the once-weekly feeding cycle of superior species. They showed fear when working with dangerous materials instead of the calm confidence that came with true strength. Worst of all, they displayed excessive concern for each other's welfare, constantly asking if their companions were comfortable or needed assistance. On the 7th day, everything changed. Dr. Marcus Chun was the facility's xenobiology specialist. Though he didn't know he was being observed by actual alien life, he was a relatively small human, standing only 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighing perhaps 160 pounds. His dark hair was beginning to show gray at the temples, and he wore thick glasses that made his brown eyes appear larger than they were. "Marcus, we've got a problem," called Dr. Sarah Peterson from across the research bay. "The atmospheric processor in Section C is showing critical readings. Something's wrong with the containment field." Marcus looked up from his quantum resonance scanner and frowned. "How critical are we talking?" "Full breach possible within the hour. If that happens, we lose atmosphere in the entire research wing. All our experiments will be ruined, and anyone in that section could die." Zarathic perked up with interest. Finally, she would see how these weak creatures handled a genuine crisis. She expected them to panic, perhaps evacuate the entire facility and call for rescue from their homeworld. Such cowardice would make excellent material for her report to the Council. Marcus was already moving toward Section C, followed by Sarah and 2 other researchers. They entered the danger zone wearing their heaviest environmental suits and carrying emergency repair equipment. The atmospheric processor was a crucial piece of machinery that maintained breathable air in the facility's various sections. Without it, the research station would become uninhabitable within hours. "There," Marcus pointed to a massive cylindrical tank that was part of the processor system. "Micrometeorite impact. The outer hull is compromised, and the inner containment field is failing." The tank stood 12 feet high and 8 feet in diameter. It contained highly pressurized atmospheric gases that would explosively decompress if the containment field failed completely. Worse yet, the explosion would trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the entire facility. "We need to replace the entire containment unit," Sarah said, studying her readings. "But the replacement unit weighs 800 pounds. It will take all of us working together with the mechanical lifters to position it correctly." "The lifters are down for maintenance," replied Dr. Kim, the facility's engineer, "and we don't have time to bring them online. The field will collapse in 30 minutes, maybe less." Zarathic leaned forward in her observation pod, fully engaged now. This was the moment when human weakness would be exposed completely. They would be forced to abandon their facility and flee to safety, proving once and for all that they were unworthy of Galactic Council membership. Marcus studied the situation for several long moments, his mind working through possibilities. The replacement containment unit sat on a transport cart 20 feet away, but moving it into position manually seemed impossible. Even with all 4 humans working together, they lacked the raw strength to lift something that heavy. "Everyone stand back," Marcus said quietly. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. "What needs to be done?" Marcus walked over to the replacement unit and placed his hands on its metal framework. The unit was a solid cylinder of advanced alloys and electromagnetic field generators. At 800 pounds, it represented more than 5 times Marcus's own body weight. Zarathik watched with growing curiosity as the small human began to examine the unit from different angles. Surely he wasn't planning to attempt something as foolish as trying to move it by himself. Marcus took several deep breaths, flexed his shoulders, and bent his knees. His companions watched in stunned silence as he wrapped his arms around the containment unit and began to lift. The unit moved. Zarathik's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. The human was actually lifting 800 pounds of solid metal and machinery. Not just lifting it, but holding it steady while his companions cleared obstacles from his path. "Impossible," she whispered. Marcus's breathing became heavier, and sweat began to bead on his forehead inside his helmet, but he continued to hold the massive unit. Step by step, he carried it across the 20-foot gap toward the damaged atmospheric processor. His movements were controlled and deliberate, showing no sign of the catastrophic failure Zarathik had expected. "This must be some sort of mechanical augmentation," she said to her aide. "Scan him for cybernetic implants or powered exoskeletons." "Already scanning, Your Highness," Vexik replied, his own voice filled.